relationships rather than transactions. So I'm excited to have you here for our panel on how to fund your business to get it started out. We'll go ahead and have each of our panelists introduce themselves. I'll start with myself. My name is Rob, from where they're at to where they're going. Some that does involve funding, so we get them prepared to actually speak with funders. John, why don't you go ahead and take the floor and introduce yourself?
Thank you. So my name is John Long. I'm Director of Application Services at Kikoda. We're a technology consulting company, and we often work with startups at various stages. Some of them come to us fully funded, but a lot of them just come with ideas. And we work with them to kind of achieve MVP, MNP. What's important, what's not important, and how do you explain that to your investors or potential investors?
Well, great to have you. Kevin?
I'm Kevin Pope. I, among other things, am an entrepreneur in residence with iKove Startup Nursery out of Columbus, Ohio, and Miami, starting a hub here in Tallahassee. And we work primarily with commercialization of technologies, deep tech out of universities. So we find the cool tech and evaluate it to see whether it is something that has significant commercial value. And if it does, we license it, start a company, form a team, provide initial funding for that. And
wonderful. So each of you have a little bit of different perspective on when it comes to funding. John, why don't you start us off and tell us a little bit about Kikoda's journey and what that has made for your company.
So Kikoda we didn't do a lot of venture funding or anything like that. It was really self-funded. We had some people that had come, as the company has grown, we've taken on customers. But self-serving there because their success helps our success. Ultimately, we want the success. That piece, but that's not really what's important when you're talking to an investor or trying to understand a market. So that's a piece that we work with people on.
So very cool. Well, that leads me to a question for you, Kevin. As you look at businesses from the commercialization standpoint and investing so much energy, time, and money into their growth, what are some of the things you're looking for? Obviously, Kikoda has this background in helping them firm up what their value proposition is and what the technology is and why it makes sense for the industry they're going after. But from the perspective of actually offering funding for that, what are the key things that you're looking for?
well, I have to answer that two ways. One is from the perspective of iKove. iKove is unusual as a funding body because we get in so early. We generally are working with technologies that don't have, may have a technological team, a primary investigator, maybe some grad students, but they generally don't have a company yet. So there's a lot that we don't have to evaluate. It's mostly the technology and the product market fit, and where the state of the market is and where the state of funding is for that kind of activity. But with some of the other projects I've worked on prior to iKove, where we were looking at companies, I really think, obviously the tech is important. The tech has to work, or at least have the prospect of working. And it has to be something the market wants. That's a key element. It's got to be something that they want it and they're willing to pay for it, and they're willing to pay something that's more than what it costs you to make it. Kind of basic fundamentals. But after that, it's really a team. It's got to be the right people. And I've probably advised and mentored 100 or more teams, and the successes have all been because of having the right suite of people, and they get along. They don't have too much ego wrapped around their own position. They're not lording being CEO over everybody else on the team, that sort of thing. If they work together harmoniously, there's a lot of potential. If the egos get in the way, or they have one single vision of how to be successful, and that's the only way to move forward, they're probably not going to be successful.
Wonderful. So as you look, I think, at the community here in Tallahassee, you both have experience in this community connections. You've seen the funding around the community grow. What are some of the things that are frustrating about it? And then talk a little bit about what you've seen, if anything, that's exciting in the last few years.
Well, I want to talk more about the exciting part than the frustrating part, but so I'll start there. But the exciting part is, I think there are more, I know the market's kind of going up and down right now, but it doesn't change the fact that there are more investors willing to invest and ways to invest than there are good startup companies. So as a person, as a founder of a startup company, you have a lot of options on where to get your investments from. I think that's very exciting. So I think that's a great thing. And it's just for people starting coming up, a lot of startups won't succeed, but the fact that you have a lot of opportunity now to try out those things, and it's a little bit different. We've got different kind of crowdfunding ways to fund those things now, different types of investment models like the Y Combinator can come with that safe model. So there's a way to get investment funding in that doesn't have debt to the company right away. So I think it's very exciting. As far as the challenges go, I think trying to find investors that understand what you're shooting for can be a challenge based on the history of that investor and how reputable they are. So
I want to rephrase that, and you tell me if I'm correct. There's not a lot of experienced investors in the community. So if you're going after a particular industry, it can be hard to find someone that has experience funding those types of companies.
I think that's true. And I think, every investor is going to have their own preferences for the types of things they invest in, what stage they invest in, and how do they format that. But I think there is a lack of experience there, but I think that will improve. And there are one of the other exciting things I think as well is investors are more open to sharing how they choose investments these days. So being able as an investor, you're going to be an angel investor or some other type of investor. You can look at how other people are choosing their investments. Now, some of the people are sharing that information, so that'll help the market. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to start with the frustration. As a guy who focuses on deep tech, very technical stuff, it can be difficult in this community because we don't have an industrial base. So unlike Orlando, you go south of the UCF campus and you've got Siemens and Lockheed and L3Harris and huge companies, small companies, all kinds of different companies working on different technology. We don't have that base here. So it ties into what you were saying, John, that it's difficult to find folks that are familiar. I mean, it's a whole educational process, and maybe not a comfort level. If they've never invested in a certain industry, then they're going to be very uncomfortable about doing that. They can't judge the risks as well as if it's something that they know. So that's a difficulty, a challenge for us. Now to go positive, that's one of the reasons why we think that you can build that, even without an industrial base, you can build that by not just cherry picking around and getting one technology from FSU and one from UCF and one from Georgia Tech and all that. We've decided to focus on this area, FAMU, FSU, and there's enough there to be able to pull a company out, maybe a company a year, and start building a deep tech ecosystem right here in Tallahassee. One thing people forget is that there's a national laboratory here. the high magnetic field laboratory that everybody forgets about is here. So there's the best technical knowledge about magnetics in the world is right here in Tallahassee. So that's an area that we can definitely build on.
And we do build tanks. Tank parts we're building. There is some industrial. Just to add to that, I think it's more niche. Like we see a lot more niche technology here because probably most likely due to the magnetic lab entices that really technical niche, but it's not as wide as what you would see in some other communities because there's not as much exterior support. I want to touch on something you mentioned, John, and I think it's okay to go kind of high level here and not give us a checklist, but you mentioned there aren't a lot of good companies. Can you define that? What are the things that when you think of what a good company is, what does that look like to you?
Well, I don't do a lot of investing, but I do work with a lot of people that do that. And I think you'll probably have something to say about this as well, but looking for you mentioned the team, right? And ultimately, the good company, you have to have a good idea. You have to be able to communicate that idea, but ultimately it comes down to a small startup company. It's going to come down to the team, the founders, the startup company. Are they obsessed about what they're doing? Do they love what they're doing? Can they communicate it and evangelize it? Because the idea and the product that they're delivering, it's going to change. And if they're not able to adapt and change at a fast pace, that's an indicator of success there. So to me, what I look for, when we're trying to coach teams, is those are the qualities we're trying to instill in people when they go out to the market. Is your idea might be great, but it's not going to look the same 5 years from now, and you need to be able to adapt to that. So I think people struggle with that. They get caught up in their own personal preferences or biases, or don't see their the blind spots that they have, and it's easy to get caught up in those things and not focus on the part that's going to help your business grow.
So one of the ways I phrase this is typically your solution is not necessarily the solution someone will pay you for.
Right.
And the business goal is to create solutions that people will pay for.
Right.
And that's a basic tenet.
You'd be surprised how many that goes right out the window. I solved it. This works for me. Everybody should buy this.
That's true.
Let's face it, entrepreneurs, especially in deep tech, where it's very, very technical, those people are all not just experts, they're world-class experts in their field. So they're brilliant people. And let's face it, brilliant people are used to having their ideas being good. So if they get an idea about what is going to sell, they're pretty sure that they know the answer already without ever going out and asking a single customer.
Right.
And that's why, for the last 8 years or so, I've worked with the National Science Foundation Innovation Corps cohort in Orlando at UCF. And out of 100 different teams that I've worked with there, it's when I was talking about the team and the flexibility, that's really what I was thinking about, is the ones who come in thinking they already know what the market's going to want, quickly find out they're wrong. And then can they adapt to that? Or is that become part of their ego to be right? If they're more concerned with being right than they are with capturing what the market really wants, they're not going to adapt, they're not going to be successful. If they can submerge their own egos just enough to be able to listen to other people, then they've got a huge chance.
So what are the kind of things that you would mentor? Like, how do you guide an entrepreneur through that journey so that it's really what I'm asking is, what are you looking for? What kind of things are you going to say? And what do you want to see come out of it for them to know that they have that flexibility, that they have that capability? What kind of situations, experiences, how do you nudge that?
First, they have to figure out what they think is right. It's very scientific. Have an H&O, have a hypothesis, and write that down. Business model canvas, great tool for putting down what you think your business is going to be. It's not what it's going to be, but you got to start somewhere, and then generate questions to ask people to verify or validate or invalidate those hypotheses. And then you've got to figure out who's your market.
Now, are you
Go out and ask.
coming in and saying, hey, go do a little model canvas? or are you expecting that legwork to already been done? Like if I bring you a company as a business incubator and say, we've already worked them through these, they've tested the market, they found a market fit, is with what you're doing here now, is that kind of where you want to meet them as long as they're a deep tech, or is there still more work to be done before you would kind of come on and start taking them in?
We're generally going to come in very early.
Yeah.
So a lot of that work, we're going to guide them and participate with them in that market analysis. A lot of early stage tech entrepreneurs just don't know that. They've spent their lives studying particle physics, or biochemistry or something. They haven't spent time learning business. And that's okay. They're really good at what they do. They can generate products. They tend, in my experience, to not make great CEOs. They make great CTOs. Yeah. But they need to work with a team and be able to work with a team that has that other experience and respect that business knowledge in a business is just as important as technical knowledge.
One of the things you mentioned I want to follow up on is you talked about analyzing that market, and a lot of things, when you're going to get an investment, especially early on, you want to understand the existing market, but you also want to understand what is that market going to look like in 5 years, because the ideal investment is a small market that will become a huge market, right? If you're shooting for a large, not that you can't do it the other way around, if you go to a startup that's in an already existing large market, you can still grow that business, but you're more likely to get a faster, larger return if you get a good idea in a small market, and that company can help explode that market larger. So, yeah.
Well, as you look at the future of Tallahassee and where we can put our resources, our focus, build those relationships, are there any organizations or any resources that individuals in our community can turn towards to be better prepared for growth, be better prepared for investment? Where here locally does that make the most sense?
I think Dummy Station's a good spot for that. It's the first thing that comes to mind.
I appreciate that, for sure. But there are a few other organizations, but where have you been kind of going and looking for these potential companies?
I kind of, no offense, but I kind of pull people out of there just isn't the same level of entrepreneurial ecosystem here yet. You guys are working on it,
yeah.
But you can avail yourself of every opportunity in Tallahassee and then go to Orlando and go, wow, look what's going on here. So, but there's no reason you can't travel the state some. You can go to Orlando, and I've known a bunch of people that did like Million Cups and would just do pitches all around the state. 5 or 6 pitches, you get an amazing amount of feedback for free, and they always come back a little wide-eyed, but with a lot more knowledge of how to present what they're doing, think about what they're doing.
And anyone who doesn't know, 1 Million Cups is an organization that was started by the Kauffman Foundation on the idea that it takes 1 million cups of coffee to turn an idea into a business in reality. And so every Wednesday morning at 9 a.m., 2 entrepreneurs come out. There's no bar. It's not a pitch. It is a presentation on where you're at, what you're working, what you're trying to do, and get 20 minutes of feedback from the community. So it works really well to bring people around the entrepreneurs and the ecosystem. I think I hold like the 3rd highest number of presentations. It's a big proponent for it, and a lot of them are virtual. And post-pandemic, there's a lot of them still have a virtual component, so you may be able to do a lot of that without ever leaving your home.
And I have to say, but as terrible as the COVID pandemic was in so many ways, physically, socially, economically, there have been some positives. And one is, it is so much easier to build a business and to seek funding now when people are, when remote is normalized. I have calls internationally every week, and the idea of having to fly to Canada to have a meeting face to face, that would blow a week of my time and a month of my budget. And now to be able to have those calls twice a week by Zoom it's a lifesaver. There's so much, taking advantage of that is a huge part of entrepreneurship now.
Absolutely. I think that's great too, because even if you have a company based out of Tallahassee, you can access resources around the world for that startup, right? If you need something, there's a skill set that isn't here, unless you like physically need them here to build something, they can work remotely and you can still access all that talent. So yeah, that's great.
Any other thoughts before we move into Q&A?
I was going to throw out just a concept that, I mean, going back to the main topic here, funding your startup, what wisdom do I want to share about funding a startup? And I think the main idea is you've got to be innovative about sources. I think too many people read, I don't know, Forbes magazine or something, and read about VCs, and that's the first place they're targeting, and that's the last place to target, because the guys you go to last. For a lot of reasons. I mean, partly because they're the guys when you've already built something. You're trying to grow it, but early ideation stage and into pre-revenue, you'll give away the farm if you try to go that far. So there's a ton of stuff. Example, Department of Energy now has about $1 billion that they're giving away in grants for development of a hydrogen hub. So I'm heavily involved with some folks that are starting their ventures with DOE grants. Those are completely non-dilutive, and that's part of what I call mission-oriented funding rather than return-oriented. VCs are primarily return-oriented. Things like government agencies are almost exclusively mission-oriented. There's things you have to do and hoops you have to go through to get it, but it's because they want to seek a certain outcome, whether it's economic or social or environmental, whatever. So you can look at your business and try to find those mission-oriented funding sources first, because you won't have the same level of pressure to develop revenue within 2 years, return their investment within 3, turn a 5x return in 5 years, and that sort of thing.
John?
I'll just say for a founder or for somebody starting that, it's okay to come off a little crazy and believe in things that are not possible, because you have to, you're pushing the edge somewhere, right? You're coming up with a new idea. It's okay to do that, but you want to be right. You want to be right about the things you're talking about, and you really need to believe in yourself. So, yep.
Well, I'd love to answer any Q&A questions. Julia, you have one?
Yeah, so I know, John, we talked about how you've also helped some founders through the process of, I guess, an MVP, and then also consulting them, and then also they've invited you to go to these pitches, right,
yes,
to investors, so you kind of see the perspective of both. So I guess my question is what type of clientele is it like a upfront fee type of thing, and through Kikoda that you can arrange?
A lot of our contracts are time and materials contracts, so they'll contract for us to say, hey, we have multiple different services, right? So we do like SaaS software and cloud platform and data analytics, but generally most of our customers will come to us, they have some sort of product that involves building out a technology solution in the cloud or something like that. We'll go through that whole process on what does it take to look like from end to end. The part you're talking about, we're going to go in and help them communicate that. We'll usually work with them very heavily on, there's a lot of low-level details that need to happen, but ultimately, here's how you're going to explain your return on investment. Here's how this is going to help you grow. Here are the differentiators you're going to need to use to kind of sell yourself in the market, and then how to communicate that to your investors. So sometimes they do ask us to come in and help communicate that and say, hey, here's our team of experts in this area, because they may not be experts in the technology area. They understand it, but there are certain times where a board or some other type of investment vehicle wants to understand more about it, so they'll have us come in and do a presentation that for them that talks through all of those things of what's going to be delivered, what are they going to get out of it. So it's been a very fulfilling process. I really enjoy that part of it. Yeah.
I know you focus on early stage, But then both of you probably have a network of people, of investors from Angel, I'm guessing, and you probably wouldn't want to refer anyone if you obviously want to contribute. But I am just kind of browsing, but I know there's events in Florida. Maybe there's a network or events that you recommend, or is there, as far as being local, is there a program that needs to be needed to educate people who want to be angel investors? Is there something that exists already like that they're networking and getting together? And so I'm just coming up with some ideas, but maybe even that way.
iKove's a bit unique because although we provide some early funding for these opportunities coming right out of university, then we're immediately turning around and trying to get the next stage and the next round ourselves. So we're also seeking funding a lot. Now we do have a large network of primarily European investors, which is a challenge for us now since their economy is even worse than ours. But getting into the Florida funding network is actually something we're in the process of doing right now. We haven't, our office in Columbus is good at Ohio sources, and there are more in the way of state government sources in Ohio than there are in Florida. But so we're still learning that ourselves, even though we have a network, but we need another network that's more local.
So I can talk a little bit about that. I raised capital in the state of Florida, and I'm still pretty heavily connected with those resources across the state. So Florida Funders is one of the biggest ones. They do an annual conference that's phenomenal for getting connected with a lot of investors, as well as if you're a startup that wants funding, that's a good place to go if you can get in there. They have a decent application process that you'll have to go through to present during it, but you can just attend as an attendee. Then there was the I-4 effort that was a few years ago, and there's still a lot of remnants on the work that they did to bridge across the I-4 interstate to connect the investors there. Most of the heavy Miami, Orlando, and Tampa all have fairly decently well-developed investment networks. It wasn't so even 5 years ago, but now we're really at a point where they have early stage funding through kind of later stage funding. Well, those pipelines are well developed or pretty close to it. There is in Jacksonville Angels. In Tallahassee specifically, there's been several efforts to start that. Even last year we had Wefunder, and Read wasn't able to make it, but it was going to be on this talk where you could invest $100 in startups, and we couldn't get anyone to do it. So there's a real opportunity in this ecosystem to kind of bring awareness that there are companies here that you can invest in, that you can be engaged in what is going on in this ecosystem. So on the funding side of that question, there are well-developed systems across the state and across the nation that you can get engaged with, but locally it's still kind of 5 to 10 years behind everybody else.
Florida Venture Forum is a good, they have a conference every year in Miami in February. I'll be at that. Because that's a big one. Like all the big funders in Florida are there.
That's the one I was talking about.
Yeah.
Is that Florida Fund? Yeah, Florida Venture Funders. Yeah.
Well, Florida Funders is a group, but the Florida Venture Forum is a conference.
Gotcha.
And I'm sure Florida Funders will be there. But and they have a show in Tampa late in the year, September, October, something like that. I can't quite remember when. It's focused more early stage.
That's great. Synapse is another good one.
Yeah.
If you're not connected with that, that's a great platform. They're working statewide to connect us all together around innovation. So if you're tech-based and focused, that has investors as well as technology resources to connect you across the ecosystems.
Just a clarification real quick. Florida Venture Forum has 2 annual conferences. One is the Florida Early Stage Capital Conference for early stage ventures. The other is the actual Florida Venture Conference, which is for growth stage and later stage companies typically. Larger funds and firms are going to be at that one, which is in February. And smaller seed funds and angel groups and some Series A funders tend to congregate at the early stage conference, which is later in the year. I I think October. So yeah, those are two great events to get plugged in. Whether you're thinking about gearing up to raise a round of funding, or if you're already in the middle of a round, those are two good events to get plugged into.
You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I was gonna
Sorry.
introduce yourself too.
Yeah, Matt Johnson. I run a seed fund based in Atlanta. Live in Thomasville, Georgia, so just up the road from Tally, and have been a part of this ecosystem, trying to help it along for many years now. So,
We appreciate your
Thanks
hard
for
work.
joining us.
Some of the organizations locally to highlight, if you want to get involved on the tech side of it, you have NAP 20. It's more of a social group, Nerds Across Tallahassee. It's a great way to get in contact with other individuals that are in the tech space and kind of that deep technology sphere. You also have the Tallahassee Technology Alliance, which puts on events that helps to bridge the gap between tech employers and tech talent in the ecosystem. So that can be somewhere where you can find those potential investable ideas and those collaborations. Both of those are great examples. You also have Innovate TLH, which is something new that's spinning up. So there are a couple of efforts in the ecosystem that are trying to pull the community together around some of these more higher tech and high growth ideas. And of course, Domi Station does their first Friday every Friday, except for January, where you can come and just network with a wide variety of people. My perspective is the more organic collisions, the more relationships we can build, the more of this that will spur, because early investment, a lot of the times is friends investing in either recommendations from other friends or in individuals that they have met and believe in. So it's really at a core grassroots effort to start spurring this kind of connectivity across our ecosystem. Any other questions from the audience?
I have one more thing I'd love to add.
Matt.
So, and I think this is super important for emerging ecosystems like a Tallahassee. So, you know, the panelists talked earlier about alternative ways of financing startups outside of traditional venture capital and angel funding. What I'm seeing more and more of is customers helping fund early companies. So you may be able to take that approach here. If you're able to secure a customer or a partnership or a pilot, you know, in some way locally, customers, because venture and startups have become more mainstream, they're aware that these opportunities to invest exist. And so they may be inclined to take an equity position in your company strategically to help you grow because you're solving a problem for them. So your customer becomes not only someone that pays you for your product or service, but also could become an owner in the business. So I'm seeing more and more of that, and it's a viable way to get these things funded and off the ground sometimes.
I have a follow-up question. So what's a good first goal for someone to say, like, hey, I have 1,000 customers? And
well, if you have 1,000 customers, you're probably way beyond
I'm just thinking,
that.
you know.
Yeah, I think MVP, or MVP is not really a term that I like to use, but you have a market-ready product. Something is ready to go out, sort of outside of even beta. But you've got customers that you've been working with. They know you, they know the product. They've maybe helped you adjust and pivot along the way. So they're already telling you what they want and what they need. Those are the ones to really hone in on and just deepen those relationships and approach them with a deal. I mean, just approach them with it. Say, hey, I don't know if you've thought about this, but we are thinking about raising some capital for early growth and to really take this product out into the world and take it further. Would you consider partnering with us financially to help do that?
Just what Matt's talking about is bootstrapping. So typically that's the bootstrapping model where you're working with your customer base and revenue you're generating. But I like the fact that you added the equity investment. A lot of people miss that. You can work with those early customers to find and build those relationships and take that into an equity stake in the company. Yes.
I think part of it is also people don't know that that's possible.
Yeah.
And they need to know who that is.
Wefunder is a great platform for doing that.
As a starting point?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
You can
They've
set
raised
the
like up to 50 million, you said, or over 100 million for each
you can, I forget what the limit is, it has to do with SEC stuff, but they quite literally can set the amount, as the entrepreneur is the one setting the terms. And so that's either equity stake, that's either, you give them a return on their investment, you give them a product, you can do all of, so you could quite literally go through all those stages that, that were talked about all on the platform. You start off with, hey, here's my product. You're going to get the product for X amount of dollars. You know, it's 50% off. And then you go, hey, did you like the product? We're going to go to stage 2 of the product, and then we're doing an equity stake. So since you were the first investor, we're giving this, you know, bonus percent on the equity that you would get off of the valuation. So
that's why we wanted Read on.
It is. Yeah, I mean,
Say, Read, we missed you.
Yeah, these tools are there, and the platforms are available to do this really seamlessly in today's society.
And that's called Wefunder?
Wefunder.
Yeah, they're one of the platforms.
We ran a test for our last pitch event, and it was a great experience. And then they actually help a lot of founders through the process. So it's almost like it's a great experience for these early stage entrepreneurs to go through, and then be ready to approach someone like Matt.
Domain companies have raised about 150. I know for sure 100K. I know one company for sure raised $100,000 on Wefunder. Zing Drones.
Yes, Zing Drones.
Which is one of Domain's graduates.
And they had several Y Combinator startups raise funds through Wefunder as well.
Yeah. I think, kind of piggybacking on that as well, that even if you don't want to go, you're ready to go through route of something like Wefunder, if you're just finding individual investors and you've not gone through any sort of round of funding, that the change, the legislation that came out of the 2012 Jobs Act and that scaled application, you know, for future equity, that framework is super simple to use. And you can get investors in there that'll eventually convert into equity. If you haven't set anything up yet, you don't have anything, you can get individuals invested. Like it's a very simple process.
It's a safe note.
Yeah.
Or it's not a note, it's a safe.
It's
a safe. Yep. Then Y Combinator has all the documentation on it. It's all free, out in public.
And it's very easy. Like it's free. It's not, there's not a huge debt burden to the company. It's a very easy thing to get started with. So.
All this, whether we use a safe or use Wefunder, really is on the relationships, because you're not going out. You can do the platform, you can do cool videos and do all this, but you really need to front load it, just like any crowdsourcing. You go to your community, the relationships you have. The nice things about these legislative changes is it could be 10, it could be 20, it could be $100, and say, hey, you know, instead of taking me out to dinner for my birthday, invest in my company. You know, those kinds of conversations are what you're having in this early stage, and you have something that they can hold on to. Like here's a piece of safe. The safe is a terminology, meaning that you're giving them equity in return for that investment. So those kinds of tools are there and easy to use, so that you can grow your business idea without burdening or going through the VC. With VC is a lift. Like the due diligence alone will destroy most businesses.
Be ready for that.
Yep. You're not ready for it. So, like we've talked a little bit on that higher end, but we really are in this ecosystem, even just building out those relationships in a way that you can go and ask for $100 or $50 or $10,000. I forget what the SEC limits on any non-certified. So there's a lot. If you have questions, we can go into detail. But there are different areas with resources, no matter what stage you're at or where you're at in your idea, that can help you get the funding that you need to get the idea to where you want to go. And with that, I thank you all for joining us. This was an absolutely invigorating conversation. I hope we have more of these throughout the year as we continue to look at how we bring more capital to our ecosystem.